now with Gina Vanloenen to chat about her fertility journey, all along the way with multiple miscarriages, 3 rounds of IVF, despite great AMH, some poor egg quality kind of mixed in there. So welcome, Gina. We're ready and excited to hear your story.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This is fun to do, and I think my story is super interesting. So it'll be good for people to hear just another perspective on fertility.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Well, if you want to go ahead and kind of start off like where this all began, you can totally just jump in.
Yeah. So I grew up in New Jersey and I went to Kansas State University for undergrad in the hopes of being a veterinarian. And I ended up going to vet school, which was wonderful. And I met a guy from Kansas and ended up marrying a very, very rural farm boy. So now we live in the middle of nowhere, which has been fun and different and super unique, but it definitely had some impacts on my fertility journey. So when we started trying, we were married when we were quite young. So we got married when we were 24. And then because my career was so rigorous and he also had a career, we kind of put off childbearing until I think I had to try to convince him for like 6 months, like, let's get this party started. Just because I don't know, he just was happy with the way our life was and I didn't feel any need to start having kids. He needs to be pushed into things, which is kind of funny. But we started in December of 2020, starting to try. So we were 27, both of us, I believe, 28 maybe. And yeah, after, I don't know, 9 months or so, I kind of knew something didn't feel right. He was convinced that I was just crazy. And my mom had infertility having us. She had 3 miscarriages and had multiple excision surgeries for endometriosis. So I had that kind of in the back of my mind, but I never really showed any signs of having any endo issues. I was on birth control since I was like 16. So I didn't really know what my actual period looked like, even though I thought I had a very normal period. Now you realize that that's just withdrawal periods and all these things once you start to learn. But yeah, so I knew something didn't feel right. So of course I was like already heavily involved in listening to podcasts like yours. And I lied to the OBGYN and said that we had been trying for a year. It was 9 months, so it's not that big of a difference. But we got an HSG done and started some blood work and didn't find anything. My husband had a semen analysis as well, which, of course, like many guests, was absolutely perfect.
Right. So frustrating, especially because it sounds like he wasn't like jumping at the gun to have kids. And so like I related when you said after 9 months, he thought you were crazy. You're like, no, dude, this has been a long time.
Oh my gosh, so long. It's like, and even when you go through infertility, like, you know that every month you get a period. It doesn't matter if it's your second month trying and you don't want your period. Like, it is a devastating experience. And I think men really just don't resonate with that feeling in the beginning because they have no idea, they just don't know like the physical effects of your hormone shifting and all these things. And of course, my husband is also like not the picture of health. So I make fun of him quite a bit for that. He's just like, he's gotten a lot better, but he's definitely like a canned corn and canned green bean kind of guy. Like, he is just, we were hoping.
That sounds so Kansas.
It's very, very Midwest. It's very, very Midwest. And I make fun of him all the time, but just like to get him introduced to new food groups and like there is meat besides just beef and like things like that. So it was just funny when all this started to happen because I was like, it's got to be him, right? He's got to have some sort of issue.
It's your sperm.
Yeah, he's perfect. Everything's fine. So we did our first round of Clomid in that August of 2021 and we got pregnant. So it was like amazing, so exciting. He was kind of like, see, everything's fine. And I was already like so nervous about miscarriage because again, I was very involved in this community, just like listening. I wasn't like participating in the community. But so I was just very aware that like, for whatever reason, it feels like our subgroup of women also go through miscarriages a lot. And so our first ultrasound, I didn't have any betas done at that time. I didn't ask for any betas. My OBGYN obviously didn't think anything was wrong with me either. So he didn't do any betas, but I was having darkening tests. I knew to kind of look for that. And then our first ultrasound was at like 7.5 weeks, and the baby was measuring 6 weeks and 2 days. And there was a heartbeat, but it was like, it felt really weird. Like the ultrasound tech had a really hard time finding it. She kept asking me to like hold my breath, thinking maybe she was getting my heart rate. Like the whole thing just felt pretty eerie. And when she left the room, I said to my husband, I was like, we're having a miscarriage. Like, there's no way that this is normal. And of course, like, again, being a man, he has like no idea what I'm even talking about. He's like, what? Like, why do you think that? And I just like, I just know, I can feel it. Mm-hmm. And so we went up to the doctor, and of course he had no concerns at all. He was like, oh, maybe you ovulated late. And I'm like, okay, I'm a medical professional. I have been tracking ovulation for 9 months, and you gave me Clomid. So I don't think I ovulated a week and a half late, respectfully.
Yeah. So, okay, so your OB that's seeing you now seeing you for the pregnancy, is he the one that gave the Clomid? So you were really just dealing with the OB at that point?
Yes, he's the one that gave the Clomid. So he was fully aware of the whole situation. And yeah. And so then I was like, he was like, well, it's mild bradycardia. So mild low heart rate, being that it was 100 beats per minute. And he was like, we could just bring you back in next week. But again, and this is the sentiment, unfortunately, that has stuck with me for 2 years. He was like, once we see a heartbeat, the chance of having a miscarriage is super low.
Yep.
And I was like, do you say that as a doctor? Like, do you give someone that, that thought process? So we went back a week later, and the heartbeat was 57. And then we went back a week later, and unfortunately there was no heartbeat. Wow. So it was just like a lot to, I think, have that kind of false sense of security from him. And I knew something was wrong. So I didn't really like go with that in my gut, but I kind of felt like offended that he even went there with me. So it was just like really hard.
So often. Like that they do say that they say like, okay, well, we did see a heartbeat, and like it dropped to, I think it's like what, less than 20% or something like that, or even maybe less than that. But yeah, still, like it just, and then you hold on to that hope, and then I feel like it just hits even harder when then it doesn't happen, or like
I think it was. Yeah, I was going to say, I think all miscarriage is super, super hard, right? All of it is, but like to go and see that heartbeat and then have to go back and see it again. That same situation, ours was 86 beats per minute the first time. And so like for yours to even be 100, I've done so much research, because you're right. Like they say, oh, you have a heartbeat, like you should be in the clear, and you can like go and read articles, and they do say, but like 100, to your point, is a little bit lower than you want it, but it's also not like, oh, it's definitely not going to be successful. Yeah. So you're just in that limbo. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it was really hard. And I think we just kind of felt like, okay, people have miscarriages. Of course, my mom had pretty much like one in between each of us, and there's 3 of us. So I was like, this happens. Unfortunately, I get that. But then I was having a lot of like issues at work as well. So I subsequently left my job because I didn't feel like my miscarriage was necessarily handled well. Like that was one aspect of it. So like that was really challenging, because we live so rural, and I am a veterinarian. We have like these big non-competes, whether they hold up in court, whether they don't. I just decided to take a different avenue, and I started traveling. Like same thing as travel nursing. I started doing that in Denver. So about 3.5 hours west of where I live. And I would go 3 days a week and then come back home. So that was kind of what I did in the interim while I was still trying to figure out what was going on. But of course it made it stressful with trying to conceive, because there were multiple times where I was ovulating and I was in Denver, and my husband would like drive through a snowstorm. So like it really was cute. He started like,
good for him. That's commitment.
But of course you just think like, okay, like God's going to answer my prayers, right? Like obviously like he wouldn't put my husband in that position that my husband has to make those decisions. And then like, things are just going to work out. Unfortunately, they just didn't. So we did get pregnant naturally in January. So we had my miscarriage took forever for my HCG to come down. I don't hear like a lot of people describing that. I guess I didn't really go on about the miscarriage. I did end up taking Cytotec. Luckily I did not have the experience that a lot of people do. Of course, it was very uncomfortable. You're at your house, but I was trying to like avoid a D&C with my work schedule, which is so silly, of course, now. And that's just like kind of part of all of the kind of drama and stress associated with my work. I was just like trying to be a good employee. And like, now it's like, for what, Gina? Like, there's no reason to do that. So I took Cytotec. I had a fine experience. I mean, it was terrible. And I'm sure it's similar to labor and from what I've heard from a lot of people. But we got through it, but my HCG was still very high. So they basically like brought me back in for what they thought was going to be a D&C. And then they checked my HCG the morning of, and it was like 100. And they did an ultrasound and there was like a small piece. Maybe they thought that was like still holding up the HCG, but I was like, if I could just wait it out and see, I would prefer not to do a D&C, because of course I had already heard of all the women that have scar tissue from D&Cs, and I was very cognizant of that. So we held off on a D&C, and then luckily my HCG did come down, but it took forever. I think my miscarriage was like in October, and I don't think I had a negative HCG until like December.
Oh, wow.
So
yeah, that's very interesting. You share that. My loss, that was very similar to yours with the heartbeat and lowering. That was the one that took the longest for the HCG as well. I think it was like 6 to 8 weeks or something, which is just excruciating because you want to try again, right? And you're like, I'm not back at baseline.
Yeah. And you're just like in this like whole like interim sadness, griefness, and I don't know, it's just challenging. But finally it came back down. And then we randomly got pregnant naturally right after. And of course, it's just like, God answered my prayers. Like he heard, like I wanted to be pregnant so quickly. And like, thank goodness this is me. Like, I don't have to experience this again, blah, blah, blah. And I had my HCG checked. And I think the first one was 247. And then the second HCG beta was 75. So it was a chemical. And it was just terrible, like back-to-back losses, feeling really, I'm a very confident and happy and outgoing person. And it was literally like, is my life worth anything in this world? Like, what am I supposed to be if I'm not a mom? And so it was just like really, it gets me emotional, like thinking about it right now, because I had just never felt like that version of depression. And I like really understood kind of, where people are coming from when they just like feel like they can't get out of bed and do anything. Cause it was one of those feelings like, wow.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. And I think you already mentioned like the hormone piece of it too. I mean, the miscarriage, your hormones are just drastically dropping off, which aids in this like process of you're already grieving, and then you have the hormones on top of it.
Yeah. And just like to compare, it felt like, again, people around here get pregnant very young. I had more pregnancies already than other people had, and they had children, like it just felt like, why have I had 2 now unsuccessful pregnancies, and people are getting pregnant on accident, of course. And like, we've been married for a month, which is like, again, that's a beautiful experience, but it just wasn't mine. And it's just so hard to relate to when you're experiencing loss after a whole year of like nothing. So it's difficult. So started going to Denver for work. And I think I wrote it down here, maybe like 3 more rounds of Clomid, February, March, and April of this would now be 2022. We did more Clomid cycles and we never got pregnant. I basically tried to quiz the OBGYN up because of course I just felt like he wasn't taking it as seriously as I was. And he was like, you know, these things happen. It could have just been a bad quality embryo, and you just
Because
keep
at
trying.
this point, you're just saying, he's saying like it's unexplained infertility or unexplained loss. They probably didn't even use the word infertility.
No, yeah, they don't even say anything. And like I
Have
asked
you?
him. Go ahead.
No, you can go ahead. I was just gonna say if you've gotten your AMH tested at this point.
Not at all at this point, which is like crazy because again, he was an OBGYN, and I now knowing so much about AMH, I'm like, why are you just like not running this on women at like annual appointments, you know? So hadn't had anything checked as far as like besides just like normal blood panel and my HSG. So I also asked him about should I do a DNC so I can test the genetics of the embryo, because again, like being a veterinarian, like that's where my brain goes, like let's try and figure out if this is an embryo issue or me. And he was like, well, it'll be expensive and your insurance probably won't cover it. And I was like, okay, knowing what I know now, like I care about any of those things.
Right.
It's so true.
Because it changes your course of, am I going to treat my anatomy or my uterus, or am I going to treat the quality of the embryos?
Well, and I still had this kind of like question in the back of my head, like, do I have endo? Like, how significant is endo? Because my mom did have it so severe. Like, what is, and then her mother had it too, and her mom had miscarriages. So I'm like, okay, so there's a direct familial line, but I just don't have any symptoms of it. So it was just like this kind of question in the back of my head, like, is my anatomy part of the issue? Because it appeared that that was my mom's issue, that she had to have excision surgery. So we go on to, I'm practicing in Denver 3 days a week. Unfortunately, Eric is coming out when I'm ovulating, which apparently was always like in the middle of a week. So that was tough, but he was a good sport about it, but we never got pregnant again. And then finally in April, I went to a reproductive endocrinologist in Denver. And of course, that was like our first RE appointment. I thought it was going to be like calm, cool, and collected. And it was like very much, you have unexplained infertility. I don't think IUIs are going to be helpful for you. You should go on to IVF. And I'm very much that kind of person that I want to get things going. So I respected that. And I liked that about our doctor, that he was very direct, but I don't think I didn't have the conversation with my husband about IVF beforehand. So I didn't like prepare him for,
Oh, wow.
this is what goes on. Yeah. And he's also like super conservative with like money and all these things. So I wasn't sure how overwhelmed he was going to get by that piece.
Did they share the financial piece of it in the first appointment?
They did, because luckily we had really good insurance, which was really helpful and surprising, and probably a huge piece that kind of kept us going. My husband's company has like I want to say it was like a $80,000 lifetime max. Yeah, it was really, really good.
Insane.
Yeah. And I might be a little bit wrong with the numbers. They had a $15,000 pharmacy benefit. So of course I ran through that on like the first round, just with the way meds are for retrievals. They're so dang expensive. Yeah. So we, of course, I think the figures were kind of like $27,000 around basically for IVF. And, we just had to pay certain things out of pocket. It just kind of depended on, but pretty much our insurance covered quite a bit of it. And so my AMH at that first appointment, we started the blood work just at the consultation. My AMH was like 3.2. So I was like, amazing. Like I'm going to have 1 million eggs and all these things.
Yeah.
My antral follicle count was maybe like 20. And then my husband's semen analysis was fine. We also did karyo screening or karyotyping, whatever those. My doctor's pretty progressive about like all of the things up front. So he did do a lot of those extra testing. Talk about expensive.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, we ended up doing it too before we even started IVF, and that was expensive.
Yeah, we just got a bill for one of them, and it was like an out of control, like out of pocket. I think we paid like $700 out of pocket or something, just because of how expensive those tests were. So we did all of that up front. Luckily, nothing crazy in that sense. And we started our first round. We had to wait like a month. And then we started our first round in June of 2022. We got 21 eggs. So it was super exciting.
Oh, yeah.
I think like 19 of them were mature. I have like great maturation. I respond really well to the meds. I feel just fine. I really don't have like a whole lot of side effects. So everything was smooth sailing. A lot of them fertilized. So I think maybe like 17 of them fertilized. So it was normal fertilization,
Insane.
everything good. So I'm doing like the math because they give you like this paperwork and they're like 30 to 40% of them should make it to blast. So I'm like, oh, great. I don't know. We'll have, 5 or 6 and we'll have
Which
our
seems
family and
like more than enough. Yeah.
oh yeah. And like, I just always went into this thinking that I would probably have 3 children because my husband's one of 3, I'm one of 3. And it just, just seemed like that's kind of what our family wanted to be. But when it came to day 5, I didn't get a call at all. And I was really quite anxious, and I knew they grew them to day 6, but I didn't suspect that I was going to be in the category of people that needed them to grow to day 6. So I called and she was like, well, yeah, there's like one that's almost ready. And I was like, okay, what about all of the other ones? And she was like, yeah, unfortunately, quite a bit of arrested, and quite a bit are at the early blast phase. And I don't remember all the numbers and things like that, but I was devastated. Like, I could not believe that we maybe were only going to get one. And it was
so on day
17 fertilized, right?
As you say, day 3 was 17.
Yeah. So I think there was like 17 or so that were growing and fertilized normally. We don't get day 3 calls at this clinic. So that was the only difference. But yeah, our fertilization at the day after was totally normal and to be expected. Wow. And so, yeah, only one made it. So that was shocking. And I basically was like full, what do we do next mode? Like, this is this my reason for infertility? Like, is this what my problem has been the whole time? And the nurse was like, maybe, or maybe not. I mean, some people just have like a bad first round, and maybe we can adjust a few things. My issue though, I did not have any maturation issue. I did not have any, like, it wasn't as if my body needed a higher dose of meds. That wasn't really the issue, which of course, when you talk to most women, like that's what they start to tweak. So for me, they took away, I think I was primed with a little bit of testosterone. Every time I took growth hormone too, which is supposed to be like really good for egg quality. And of course, that's the really, really expensive drug. But there wasn't like a whole lot they could change. So they just took away the testosterone, and they said, some women get 1 embryo the first round and they get 10 the second, and we can't really explain it. So but they did keep telling me, which again, like even in a fertility clinic, it's really unfortunate. They were like, the biggest thing you can manage is your stress. And I'm like,
that like puts that back on the woman.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're
how
stressed.
does one manage their stress? Like, what?
Ew. No. Oh, we have matching Stanleys. Sorry.
Perfect.
One, mine's just downstairs.
My husband would be making fun of us all right now.
I know, right? Mine too.
Same with mine, which we'll talk later on that one. Anyways, move forward.
Wait, I have a question. Did the doctors or anything want to test your embryo, or were they like, no, you're young, let's not?
Yes. So again, talk about like progressive. I don't think at this clinic, like he really gives that much of an option unless you're like really adamant that you don't want to do it. We also, like, this clinic doesn't do like any sort of, I know I've heard some people kind of describe that they need to have like a certain amount. Like, I think I just paid for it, and like, it is what it is. Like, I don't think it matters if I had 1 versus 10. I think over a certain amount it matters, but like, I didn't see like a huge reflection in my bill that I only had 1. So we did send that one off. And unfortunately, which like I already could feel in my bones, like it came back aneuploid. So it had,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it was like so devastating. It came back maybe with like an extra 16th chromosome. I don't know. My husband like looked into it, of course, and there's never been a child born with whatever chromosome it was. So it just was something that was non-compatible with life. And it was just hard. It was hard hearing the gender. It was a boy. So that was really hard because like, I think we just both pictured ourselves like having a boy. And so it was difficult, but we were adamant that we wanted to move forward. And we just didn't really tell anyone. We just felt like, I don't want the pressure of having to like give the numbers, give the reports, because again, people have so little understanding of what you're going through that it's like, even my mom, like I talk to all the time, she just couldn't understand the numbers aspect of it. Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? So that was my version of trying to lower my stress. We just like didn't tell anyone. I think I did like purge some Facebook for a while too, because that was just really hard seeing everyone with all their announcements and just like first birthday photos and people just celebrating constantly that they have children and that they're parents, which like, why wouldn't they celebrate? But it was really hard because it just always feels like I don't know, slap in the face that you're not there.
Yeah.
And you don't know if you're going to get there, right? I mean, that's the thing with IVF, kind of from that first round, like you just assume that it's going to be this perfect thing. And, you know, I was basically really slapped hard into the sense that like, this might not work for you.
Yeah, I feel like all three of us, you know, our first round of IVF was unsuccessful. And it's like, I think a lot of people go into IVF with, okay, this is the last resort. We're going to do IVF, sigh, right? Yeah. And then you're like on the other side of a failed IVF and you're like, what now?
Yeah, exactly. So we did a second round. I think my retrieval was on a Monday and my brother got married in Carmel. So he got married at Pebble Beach, which was beautiful in California. My brothers live in California that weekend. So like I was like a little bloated, but I felt fine, luckily. And then I told them all, like once we were there, like, yeah, we just did another retrieval. We got 21 eggs. So the same amount, pretty much same maturation, same fertilization, everything felt exactly the same. And then on day 6, there was 2. So I think on day 5, there was 4. And then by day 6, the 2 had arrested. And so there was 2. So we sent those off for genetic testing. And they both came back euploid. So it was like,
oh my God.
Wow.
That's so sorry.
No, so wait, hold on. They came back good or bad?
Euploid.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Good. So you got 2, right?
Yes, we got 2.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. I missed that. Okay.
It's okay. It's okay. No, but still just the fact that like it took us that long to even get a euploid embryo, like it was shocking. And so we thought, okay, we have this coverage. We have, you know, I'm in the mode of doing this. Like my clinic also felt like it made the most sense to do them back to back. Yeah. And like do one more if you had the financial, mental, physical ability to do all those things. They thought, you know, like, you know, I, for whatever reason, just have this egg quality that's not going to get better in a year. So it makes sense to keep doing this if I can. So we did another round in September. So I think we had a little month break kind of in between there. And I had started exploring acupuncture and I was doing a lot of yoga and doing everything I could to kind of decrease stress. And I also started at this point probably looking into like the egg donor world because that was basically what was recommended by the embryologist next if I couldn't get a whole lot more, which like, again, I'm kind of like, at this point I was 29. I'm like, is this a story that you hear? Like, I have not heard of too many people. And I think that's why I related to Amanda so much too. Like I hadn't heard of a lot of people just like not having success with IVF being so young. Yeah. I felt like most of the time when you're talking about egg donors and people, you know, utilizing some of these services, they're quite a bit older and it was not relatable because I didn't know what my issue was still.
Because I feel like we probably all were asking the embryologist questions like as we go through IVF. Did they give you any like creative response to why you had mature eggs and then like you just could never get them to mature?
Not at all, really. I mean, I had mature eggs and everything, and just I couldn't get them to grow.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you meant. Like, they just like literally wouldn't grow. And I'm like, is this
Crazy.
a thing? Like, can you check them less? Like, is that part of it that you're like opening the hood and like for whatever reason, like I started asking all these questions. And like I do think my clinic is like pretty well respected. So I didn't think that I was at like a junk clinic by any means, but also you just start like being fearful of everything. Like, why is this not working? And you're also fearful of everything you're putting in your body. So I talked to like the acupuncturist about gluten-free and dairy-free, which like I think I did for 9 weeks before the third egg retrieval. And more power to everyone that wants to do that, but like it was stressful for me.
Oh my God.
Super stressful. Like I love food. I love to enjoy food, and it just took the fun out of it.
Talk about decreasing stress. That's not the way to do it.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh. It was like, but she was like, well, that would definitely decrease the inflammation in your body. And I'm like, I still don't even know, like, I don't know any of these things on like, why, like, what's going on here? My doctor also just very much was not the type that would communicate with you. Like everything was through the nurse, which was fine. But it took, like, I wish I had known that in the beginning, because I felt very much like he didn't really like provide us any answers, which was a total contrast to how he was in the beginning, that he was super direct. So it was challenging. We did a third round. We got 21 eggs, literally same story every single time. And then very similar maturation, very similar fertilization. But unfortunately, we got 0 blastocysts.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So it was just like so hard coming from 2 euploid embryos. Like first we couldn't even make a euploid. Now we can't even make a blast. Like it was just this whole hard thing. But I think at this time I had already started a lot of mindset work on like, I don't know how long I'm going to be in this. I don't know how long I'm going to feel the need to keep trying to have a child. Like I don't think my life is ever going to be childless. So I'm going to have to figure out how to manage some of these issues, because like this is my story. Like I don't know why. I don't think I deserve it. I don't think anyone deserves it. But also like this is just what it is. Yep. And so how do I move forward and not be sad every single day that I may not have children that are genetically related to me? Like, how do I figure out that place? So I did a lot of mindset work. I know I talked about acupuncture, did lots of yoga. I did some therapy with a fertility specific therapist that had actually gone egg donor route. So that was helpful. She was like, if you ever want to actually talk about those things and ask questions. And then I had a fertility coach. So I used Lisa White, who is IVF Manifesting a Miracle.
Oh, cool.
And I talked to her.
We'll have to link that. Maybe she wants to be on the show.
I know.
She would love to be on the show, I'm sure. So she just started a podcast too. I'm sure she would love to be on the show, but we just basically had these conversations about these things. Like, how do you move forward through IVF with more joy and not just being like being angry that you're in this position, right? Like, let's accept this, let's hone on this. And that's kind of why I'm interested in always like sharing my story, because I feel like I did a lot of those things to just be at a happier place, which was nice.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So we were like, at this point, the embryologists are saying it doesn't really make sense to keep going. You know, statistically, scientifically, like I'm not getting any better, I'm getting worse, and they don't have any reason for that. So it doesn't make sense to keep moving forward with retrievals. So we were like, let's move forward with transfers. We'll put egg donor on the, backside. If we want to revisit that in the future, we certainly can. Let's not focus on that. But also, like, I'm at a place where I feel very comfortable that I just want to be a parent. I don't necessarily want to have children that, are genetically related to me. I just want to be a parent. So we went through all of the process of how do we do everything we can in case this goes wrong, which was really hard mentally for me because of course I just wanted to transfer, but I was like, I only have 2 embryos. I don't make blast easily. Let's see if we can do some of these uterine tests, which definitely have like some controversy in the IVF world, but my doctor was, I think he recommends them for people that only have 1 or 2 embryos. So in November, I did an ERA and a BCL6, which would be basically like a protein marker for endometriosis. So it was just 2 biopsies after going through all the transfer meds. So luckily those came back beautiful. So I was receptive to the amount of progesterone that they gave me, and I did not have any sort of protein marker for endometriosis.
Did that
So
give
just
you
kind of,
relief? Yeah, did that give you relief moving forward just for the endo and like not having to have the laparoscopy and all that kind of
yes,
stuff?
yes, it definitely gave me peace that like, okay, I don't need to keep thinking about this. At the same time, I was like, it would have helped to like explain my poor egg quality because this is my diagnosis now. I have poor egg quality for unknown reason. And they basically just think it's related maybe to my mom, that, you know, my ovaries were developed in her and she was kind of going through these things, but they don't really know, right? So they just don't know. And at the same time, I did have a second opinion because I was like, I just want to put this to rest again. And it was very validating because I really hadn't heard from my doctor, like, you have a challenging case. Like, he just did not say that to me because, again, I think he's just so busy and has a million patients. And that's really not like what he's in the business of doing. So this other doctor I went to, she was like, I think you have a really challenging case. I think it's just hard. It is what it is. We don't know why it is this way. But before you moved on to egg donor, she was like, first of all, are you transferring? And I was like, yes, we're going to move forward with our transfers. I just know that I'm at the youngest I'm ever going to be right now. And I want to make sure we don't feel like I should keep doing retrievals for some reason. And she was like, I think you should move forward with transfers because there's nothing saying that that's going to be part of your issue now. But if you want to revisit before egg donor, I think doing around here would be helpful. It was CCRM, so I think they really believe that their lab is, she said that the medium in which they grow their embryos is really like the high quality part. But she also agreed that my center that I was at is not a bad center. So she was like, I don't think you're going to get 10 embryos, but maybe you'd get 1 or 2 more, and that would be helpful for you.
I'm glad you
so
brought
it was
that.
validating.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I get asked all the time about like certain clinics, like, would you choose this one or this one? And this one's way cheaper. And I think like you just have to ask that question, like, okay, it's cheaper, but is the lab on site? What type of technology are they using? Are they checking them on day 1, 2, 3, 4 and taking them out of like the incubator type thing? So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. And I think like the big challenging part for us is we won't have insurance there. So it would be, $27,000 for a round of IVF where we don't know if we're going to get anything, or $30,000 for a fresh egg donor. Right. Mm-hmm. So like that would be things that we would have to definitely consider if we were going to move on with any of these other things. So that was hard, like I'm glad I'm not in that position. I need to think about it right this moment, but it was validating that she, agreed that like, you just have a very difficult case. And she was like, I'm so sorry you've gone through 3 rounds of IVF. And I'm like, thank you. Like, this is hard.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I'm sure that was like to be seen by like a doctor too, for her to say that.
Yeah. Just be heard and kind of acknowledge that like, it's not easy to do all of this financially, mentally, physically, all these things. So we moved forward with transfer prep. So that was super exciting. Just continued to kind of do all of these things and work on this mindset that like, hey, I'm in this position that I can't control anything, but I can't control anything with my embryo. I can't control anything with my uterus, but I have done everything I can do. I have done every test on my uterus that has been offered. I'm doing all this mindset work. I'm okay with our path to parenthood. And I accept that and I embrace whatever it is. So all those kind of just woo-woo, whatever you want to call them, things that just really help me. So I use like Insight Timer a lot, which is an app that's just meditation. They have great like spirit baby meditation.
Yeah,
So they
I
say,
used it too.
Love
They have,
that.
it's so good. We should link it. Will you send me the ones you use and I'll try to find the
yes,
one. It was so good. It's like specific to like like meditation, like thinking about your uterus and stuff.
yeah,
It's
I
weird.
love
and just
that.
like,
I haven't heard of it. That's really
yeah,
cool.
like calling in your baby basically, and all this kind of stuff that again, like it doesn't matter whether you believe in it or not, like, or whether other people believe in it or not, like if it just makes you feel good, and it made me feel good, like I was doing everything I can on my end, and that's all I can do.
That's all
So
that matters.
yeah, on December 27th, we transferred our higher quality embryo of our 2 embryos. And we got pregnant.
Yeah. I like
Better
I'm
than the best.
I know, I'm so excited. Gina shared she was pregnant as soon as we joined, and I'm like following the story, like, but when did she get pregnant? Because all of this happened
When did this
last year.
happen?
Yeah, so it was so exciting. We had a beautiful
So
transfer,
exciting.
of course. Like in the back of your mind, you're just like, you know, all these things, right? Like, what if it doesn't thaw? What if it's this? What if that? You know, it's just, you think of all this stuff, but I tell myself constantly, those are thoughts. They are not facts. Like, you can think all the bad things you want, but there's a reality of the situation, and that's not always what your thought process is, right? So these are just kind of trauma responses that we all have because we've been through this game for 2.5 years, 2 years, whatever it is. And your body responds to all that trauma, right? And this is the way it's responding. But
And you've never
so
had good news. So you're like,
I've never
wait,
had
what?
good news.
Yeah, you're like,
Yeah.
wait, what's happening?
And so that's a lot what Lisa White and I kind of talked on, changing the narrative of like, why would this work to why can't this work? Because basically that's just what I thought of the whole time. Like before I was like serious in the transfer prep, I'm just like, I've never had good news. I've never, you know, gotten pregnant and had a normal, sustainable pregnancy. I've never gotten through a round of IVF and been like amazed with the results. I'm always disappointed. Like, so it was just changing that narrative in my mind that now going into transfer, it was like, I don't have any reason why this wouldn't work. Like, there's nothing to say that my uterus isn't ready for a pregnancy. And of course, my embryo was not perfect quality, and it was not a day 5. So all of those things kind of would creep in my head. But I kept saying, like, I can't give up on him because he's a boy.
Oh, that's awesome.
So sweet.
Yeah. So
I'm
it's like,
so happy for you.
Oh my gosh, me too.
Have you had that first ultrasound? I'm assuming.
yeah. So I guess even like just again talk about like reassurance and just exciting stuff. So I had my beta like super late. I'm not sure why. But I had my beta 13 days past transfer, so it took forever. But it was 9:46 on the first one. So like that was super exciting. And the second one was like, I don't know, 22:50 or something. So it was like such good things. And then 2 weeks ago, we had around 7 weeks, we had our first ultrasound. And it was really cute. We went back to Denver, and the ultrasound tech, obviously she's used to doing these. So like the second she put the wand in, she was like, I see a heartbeat.
Oh,
Because,
that's the best. That's the best.
So
because
sweet.
she knows that you're like already so hyped up. And my husband was like, oh,
I can breathe. Yeah.
thank God, you know.
So that's
it's
so
like,
interesting you said that, because you shared the first ultrasound. He's like, what are you talking about, miscarriage? And then they do learn and they go with you. And then I feel like sometimes they're even more emotional. Like we're so stonewalled in it. And then they're like, oh my God, thank you.
yeah,
Bad news.
his mindset totally changed once we were like in IVF. He just like totally could relate more to what I was going through. And then, you know, like even when one of our siblings had recently, before we were pregnant, had recently announced that they were pregnant, like he was like, this is what you've been feeling all this time. And I was like, this is it, you know, like it's hard, you know, it's just hard to experience people having such an easy time. And even, you know, if we do continue to have success, like it's always going to be hard because we're always going to be infertile. But we're, you know, the whole thing is throughout this journey is we've kind of learned how to manage and cope with all these things. So yes, we had a normal ultrasound, and it was just so weird to hear them saying like, this is measuring perfectly and the sac looks perfect. And we were 7 weeks in one day and the baby measured 7 weeks in one day. And it was just like, oh
So
my gosh.
reassuring. That's so reassuring. We're so excited for you.
So excited.
Thank you. So feel like okay so far, you know, continuing just to try and like protect my peace with all this mindset stuff, because it's hard, which any sort of pregnancy after infertility, both of you guys have experienced that. It's not easy, but just taking it one day at a time.
Oh, I love that. Well, we're so happy for you. Oh my goodness. And we definitely want to share who you worked with. You said her name was Lisa White.
Yes, IVF Manifesting a Miracle is her business name.
Okay, cool. We're definitely going to share that. I love that. But we're so excited for you, and we'll definitely follow along your journey. Do you post about anything on your social media?
So I also am a part of Fertility Rally, which is a really awesome support group, and they are virtual, which is really helpful for me being in the middle of nowhere. I would love to have something in person, but just my circumstances are difficult. So I have a infertility account now. So it is G Vanloenen, VANLOENEN fertility. And I post kind of everything on there. And it's mostly just like the fertility people. I did make it private. So just anyone can request me. And
yeah, we'll tag that one when we post the episode. So
yes.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Well, we so appreciate you coming on and sharing your journey. I know definitely was a lot that you went through, but we're so excited for you that you are now pregnant with your little boy. And like I said, we're going to totally follow you and stalk you and just see all the things.
Stalk away. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much, Gina.
Thank you, guys.